Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Arbitrary 20. In this video I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could make a tank build that dumps Constitution. Since it obviously won't have a lot of hit points, I thought the best way to do this would be to get as many features as possible that let us come back to 1 HP if we would go to 0 HP. So I'll have a character that's constantly at the edge of death but extremely tanky at the same time. And one thing I would like to mention before we start this build is that the core features of this build don't come online until past level 10, so this isn't really a build I would recommend if your campaign is going to end before level 10. And then with all of that out of the way, we'll be starting off with the race. We're going to be going with half orc to get our first of many ways to come back to 1 HP if we would go to 0, that being relentless endurance. And for our ability scores, assuming point buy, we'll have a strength of 10, a dexterity of 15, plus 2 from our race for a total of 17, a constitution of 8, an intelligence of 10, a wisdom of 15, plus 1 from our race for a total of 16, and then a charisma of 13. And if you're rolling for ability scores, I would prioritize dexterity first, wisdom second, and then depending on which way you go, towards the end of the build, you might want to have a 13 in charisma for multiclassing. And then for our ideal equipment, you'll want to have any D10 versatile weapon, something like a longsword or a warhammer. And armor is something you may or may not want on this build. I'll talk about armor a little bit later. To start off at level 1, we're going to be taking a single level of fighter. For the fighting style, I would go with defense. If you are going to use armor, I'll talk about if you should use armor next level, but if you're not going to use armor, I would go with either great weapon fighting or interception. And then we'll also get second wind, which will let us heal ourselves as a bonus action once per short rest. And then for levels 2 through 12, we're going to be taking 11 levels of monk. First up, we'll get unarmored defense, and this is where the decision comes in whether you should use armor or not. If you rolled for your ability scores and you rolled really well on your dexterity and wisdom and you're able to get like a 17 or higher on your unarmored defense, I would go with that. Otherwise, I would just go with the best armor you're able to get. Then we'll get martial arts, which will allow us to use dexterity for monk weapons, give us a D4 as a damage die for our unarmed strikes, and those also use dexterity, and we'll also be able to make unarmed strikes as a bonus action. And then we'll get ki, giving us ki points, and flurry of blows, step of the wind, and patient defense. All of these options will be great in certain scenarios, but if we're focusing on defense, the main one we'll probably be using is patient defense to dodge as a bonus action when we're expecting a lot of attacks to come our way. And then next we'll get dedicated weapon. This is a great optional rule from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that lets us use a D10 versatile weapon that we got proficiency with from fighter. And then we'll also get 2 ability score increases or feats in this time in monk. Piercer or slasher could be a good option depending on the weapon you're using to raise an odd dexterity score. Otherwise, I would just boost your dexterity to 20 and then start boosting your wisdom. And then next we'll get stunning strike, not very useful against enemies with a high constitution score. If you are able to land it though, it's a great ability to help keep you alive and help you and your party do a little bit more damage. And then we'll get evasion, one of the best abilities for defense, allowing you to take no damage if you succeed a dexterity saving throw and still take half damage even if you fail. And then for our monastic tradition, we're going to be going with Way of the Long Death. The first 2 abilities, Touch of Death and Hour of Reaping, are pretty decent for tanking. Touch of Death will give us some temporary hit points if we kill an enemy, and then Hour of Reaping can make all enemies within 30 feet of us frightened, which will give them disadvantage on all of their attacks. But the main reason we took this subclass is Mastery of Death. Anytime we would go to 0 hit points, we can spend 1 key point to go to 1 hit point instead. This is incredible for our survivability. We have 11 key points right now, and that's potentially 11 times we can stay alive when we would go to 0 from 1. And then for levels 13 through 20, there's a few variations of ways you could go. First, Undying Warlock. I can't believe I'm recommending this subclass, but for this build it actually makes a lot of sense. The Defy Death feature is actually pretty decent for this build. If you do finally go unconscious, you can actually come back up as long as you succeed 1 death saving throw. It also gets the Death Ward spell, which you could stack multiple of on yourself, or you could give Death Wards to the other people in your party to help increase their survivability as well. If you just want Death Ward, you could also get that from the Undead Warlock subclass. If you want a smaller dip into Warlock, you could go with a level or 2 of Hexblade to get the shield spell with the spell slots coming back on a short rest. You could even potentially do a few levels of Hexblade instead of the fighter dip because you get similar things from Hex Warrior. Another thing you could do is take 2 more levels of fighter to get the Cavalier subclass. This would give you the Unwavering Mark feature to taunt enemies to try to make them attack you more often. And then the last option I would consider is just more levels in Monk to eventually get to Diamond Soul and Empty Body as 2 more great features that'll increase our survivability survivability, Diamond Soul giving you proficiency in all saves, and you can re-roll a save by spending a key point, and then Empty Body would make you invisible and give you resistance to all damage except force damage. And you'll probably get 1 to 2 more feats depending on which of these variations you go with. I would go with Tough and or Lucky to further increase our survivability. But that's all I have for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you'd like to check out my last build, I called it the Trickster. It's a pacifist wizard build that focuses on enchantment and illusion spells to either completely avoid combat or control enemies in combat. If that sounds interesting, you can check it out right here. Either way, thank you guys for watching. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next one.